My name is Ryan Romberg. I'm the pastor of Placentia Presbyterian Church, and this is Three for the Road. The passage for this last Sunday was from Paul's letter to Galatia, the letter of Galatians, chapter 5, verses 1, and then 13 through 26. Feel free to read 2 through 12 if you get the whimsy. It is all really great. But the last week's sermon was on those selected verses. So let's get to it. First off, what did we leave out? I would say two things. The first is the whole section, verses 2 through 12. We didn't read that in our sermon, and the reason why is it adds a lot more dynamic and layer. Plus, it just takes a lot more time to read that whole passage, but it is very valuable. Why? When we talked in the sermon about what freedoms we have, one of them was gatekeeping, and that section 2 through 12 talks a lot about that. It's using the case study of circumcision. I shouldn't say case study. It really was so important in Paul's day to say you do not need to be circumcised to be a Christian. You just need to believe in Jesus. That is, follow Jesus. That's what you are. If you want to be part of God's family, you don't need to become Jewish first. You can believe in Jesus to be a Christian. And this idea then is pretty revolutionary in the history of Judaism, in the history of religion, really. This idea of not needing to do practices that in somehow, shape, or form mark you as separate, that show your group membership in some way, that validate you, that kind of get you past the bouncer of salvation. You know, no, you don't. You have free access. You can come on in, which is really interesting when you think about it. Sometimes people don't like things like that, right? They want it to be an exclusive club where it's just like this kind of people get in or that kind of people, and anything that seems to be open to all seems a little boring, maybe. Here's the thing. That's what Jesus offers to us. Something that's available to anyone. You don't need to prove yourself to get in. The gatekeeping that we do in our lives and our churches, it doesn't come from Jesus. It comes from somewhere else. And we better be careful whenever we do it, because we're selling ourselves to something that's not of God. The second thing we left out that we could have easily talked about at some point, we kind of have in other sermons, are the lists. And the lists of things that we see here are really important. And certain commentaries I read said, hey, make sure you talk about all of these things on the list. I just don't think we had time. I don't preach hour-and-a-half sermons or 45-minute sermons, so we don't have time to go through them all. But the acts of the flesh being sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, discord, jealousy, rage, rivalries, divisions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. Whew, that's a list. One thing to note about it is Paul's emphasis on kind of this self-serving nature of all of these things. Self-glorifying, self-serving. These things are not making you more connected with other people. They're actually disconnecting you. They're glorifying you. They're bringing you along in something that you want, but they're really in some way, shape, or form not furthering what God has made you for, which is this deep connection with God and this deep connection with others. If you look at the first few, things like sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, you're looking at things, and I think we've already covered this before. We talked about the meaning of these terms. They're not just what we think of, right? Like someone does something sexually immoral. They had an affair, maybe they did this kind of stuff. The words themselves, these Greek words, they mean in many ways something that is self-serving. And all of these words have this kind of sense to them. We look at them as like maybe individual acts. Maybe that's our problem. We continue to think of them as just individual acts. They think of them as in community and what they do to communities. And so every one of these words has kind of a hint of that in it. The other one I think is really interesting in this list are things like hatred, discord, jealousy, rage. How many of you had that on your list of sins bingo card? Right? We don't usually think of that, do we? We think of other really big, hot button topics. We'd rather ignore the things that we do, sometimes every day. The hatred we have in our heart for maybe this person or these people who are saying these things that absolutely just disgust us, right? The discord we have with people who say they're our brothers or our sisters or are close to us, but are doing other things, and we want nothing to do with them. We want to turn away from them and treat them like they're not our family or our friends or people we love. The jealousy that hits us. I don't know if that's you, if that's where you fit, but I do know, I think there's a lot of latent jealousy and unspoken jealousy that happens in this world, especially in a world so rooted in kind of competition and success, that this jealousy creeps in and turns us into kind of crazy people sometimes, what we do, what we say. And then finally, the rage and the rivalries and the divisions and the factions, these things that kind of divide us. I think it's really interesting to think that these are on Paul's list of like, hey, these are the really not good things. Not just murder, not just, maybe lying or theft, these 10 Commandments things, but these other things that cause quarrels, that cause division. And we see them all over in the church. I mean, I could probably be accused of doing that myself sometimes if I say or preach something that feels like it goes against someone's inner convictions. I know someone could come to me, but they can come to me and talk to me. You can. It's totally fine that I can know like what I said maybe wasn't stated in such a way that really brought out what I was trying to communicate. Or maybe it did communicate that thing and you have a really strong problem, but at least bring it to me so we know, right? And I think we can do that for each other rather than having these inner things that we hold and we think about this other person that maybe we had a bad circumstance with, and so we're gonna kind of just let them be and who cares about them, but I'm gonna still hold on to this pain inside and this hurt and this kind of like bad feeling. Those are the things that are as on the same level, Paul says, as sexual immorality, right? Drunkenness, orgies. What? Yes, these are things that absolutely destroy us actually as humans from what God has created us to be. And so the other list is the fruits of the Spirit. I'm not going to go through all of those things, but remember, those are not things that you're necessarily supposed to just make happen. It's as you seek out what the Spirit is calling you to and allow the Spirit to work in you so that those things occur. That's what we're called to do. The fruits of the Spirit, following the Spirit's lead into our lives, into the communities that we live in, into our workplaces, all of those spaces that God is calling us forward into. Then the fruit of the Spirit starts to show when we trust in God for what God has for us and not for what we want to fix in this moment, but we step in, we listen, we learn, and then we act when called upon. What is our invitation? Well, I think our invitation is pretty clear, is to really be thoughtful about the gatekeeping that we do. Gatekeeping happens in so many different forms, even some so very innocent. And it comes not from a bad place, it comes from a protectionist place, right? We want to protect the spaces that we have from maybe think of it, the bad thoughts or the bad ideas or the bad people. And so we gatekeep. But oftentimes that gatekeeping, all it does is serve to protect God and not really serve to further someone's life. Not serves to actually engage that person where they may need to be ministered to. There can be people who come in with really hard stories and maybe really rough thoughts into your spaces, your friendship groups, your different social gatherings, our churches even. And these people, if we shut them down because they haven't proven themselves to us in the way that we want, if we do that, we're missing out on something. I think we're missing out on the fruit of the Spirit. I think we're missing out on what God really has for us, the deep work God wants to do in our souls and in our world. And so when these folks come who kind of sit on those other spaces, another opportunity for us is to learn more about these folks and why they hold what they hold, and to find a respect in that, because I'm sure there's a reason that they hold what they hold. You may not have had that same life, you may not know that same world, but to listen to those folks and then to invite them in. Invite them into a deeper knowledge of who God is, as revealed in Jesus Christ, as filled with the Spirit of God working in our lives and in this world. That, I think, is a big part of our invitation for who we are. The final piece are your questions. I mean, I didn't get many. One was on freedom, though, and this idea of freedom that we see in the American story, and the freedom we see in the biblical story. The question I got is, are they really that different? And is the American version bad? And the answer is, I don't think they're really completely different. I mean, freedom is freedom. It's just freedom from what and freedom for what. Now, that's a difference there in our American story often versus the Christian story. So the freedom from some sort of person telling you what you must do and being able to do what you want to do, kind of the freedom of choice, tends to be this American freedom. To answer the second question, not bad at all. I think we see around us. I'm not saying America is perfect or the best and everything, and some of you might think that, and I'm fine with that if you do. I am just so grateful to live in this country too. I am so grateful to be in a place where we do have freedoms that are spelled out in our official documents, and we can always go back to and at least appeal to in times of crisis, in times of trouble. That is really cool, and I'm grateful for the wise women and men who put that work in to think that through, and many of whom were deeply formed in scriptural foundations and things, enough to say, this is a wise way to govern. I'm so grateful for that. That's why it's not bad. The form of American freedom is not bad. Now, I think it becomes not helpful, and maybe even bad, you can say, if it comes up against this biblical version of freedom, whereby the biblical version says, you are given this freedom from these powers in order to be what God has truly created you to be. Not just to choose whatever you want to choose, but to choose life. As the book of Deuteronomy says, as Moses tells the people in his final sermon in the book of Deuteronomy, choose life. Or as Joshua says, choose this day whom you will serve. That choice, now that's a choice that matters. That's a freedom of choice that the Bible lays out. But it's not a freedom to say, choose. God doesn't say, choose whatever you want. Just be happy about it. No, God says, no, choose life. And choose this day whom you will serve. Now that's the choice that we have. That's the freedom we have in Scripture. Because God has set us free from the bondage to the powers. He set us free from the need to gatekeep. And He has turned us loose and invited us to follow the Spirit of God working in this world. I hope that helps. I hope that these thoughts and ruminations help further your thinking. If you have any more questions, check below. Use that number. It's not going to come straight to me. It comes to Barbara Balent, who works. I'll even see it at times. So we do have people monitoring it, but it is not my phone number. But if you throw that in there, you throw some questions in there, I'll see that. I'll respond to that. We'll get some other people responding to that as well. So if you have anything you heard even from today that you want to ask about, go and use that number, the PPC text line. May God bless you and keep you. Until next time, we'll see you again soon.